First piece of evidence of the EZLN by Ana Cecilia Herrero Guerrero. Well, first of all, we want to talk a little bit about context. On the 1st of January of 1994, international news headlines reported that an armed indigenous uprising was taking place in southern Mexico by a group called the Zapatista National Liberation Army. The Zapatista movement emerged in response to the discrimination and marginalization suffered by the original people of the Mexican Republic, particularly those that reside in the state of Chiapas. And there's been a long path towards achieving social cohesion among indigenous communities and the rest of the country. The main problem here is that Mexico is not giving priority to the issue. It's failing to acknowledge it. And the first step towards social cohesion is to get the interested parties involved, especially the government, because social cohesion among all members in the community is not seen as a priority, therefore there is no real change. Once the government can finally recognize that EZLN agreement, indigenous people will be more willing to cooperate. The government must understand where these people are coming from. There are many decades of oppression that has made indigenous people hostile and skeptical towards the government. They cannot expect that they will comply according to the law. Indigenous people must make a group that will act as a mediator with the government officials to reenact a new agreement, and they must be monitored so that they can slowly rejoin the community. According to the labor organization Article 24, international organizations have been putting pressure into the government acting in favor of the indigenous communities. Some of this are the Union of Academics of the National Institute of Anthropology and History, the Union Workers of the Autonomous University of Mexico, and the Independent Union of Workers of La Jornada. They have been exposing the lack of cooperation from the Mexican government to the United Nations in 2001. And after failing to comply with the laws given, they were then exposed to the UN. And still, after that, Mexico has not given a concrete response. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the government perspective. The Zapatista movement is seen as a rebellion. Therefore, the government does not want to give in into a group of rebels. On December 5th of 2020, our president at the time, Vicente Fox, took back the COCOPA EZLN SNI law proposal to the Senate, resuming the commitments of the San Andres Accords. No agreements were reached at the time. Sadly, not all Mexican presidents have been interested in reopening this problem. That is why no substantial change has been seen. Now, we're going to talk about indigenous communities' perspective. For centuries, they've been marginalized and ignored by the Mexican government, despite the fact that they constitute 10% of the entire population. In 1994, they decided to create the EZLN movement in response to the discrimination and marginalization of indigenous people in Chiapas. 25 years later, and despite the resulting negotiations, no agreement has arisen. Now, international organizations. A few decades ago, the UN joined efforts with different countries in order to create the International Labor Organization Treaty. This treaty is flawed because no international organization can impose such labor standards without the federal government allowing it. However, international organizations are willing to cooperate to any given solution that is proposed. So this makes us want to present with a new proposal. And this proposal is based in affirmative action. We want to incorporate indigenous people in the decision-making of the country. Just like Congress passed a rule that at least 50% of the people in Congress must be females, there should be a minimum percentage of indigenous people in Congress. This percentage would be proportional to the number of indigenous people in Mexico so that it is fair. International organizations will work as arbiters in order to ensure the fulfillment of this act. Progress will be measured every 6 months, and in the case there are complaints from other organizations like there has been, and they can prove that Mexico is not cooperating, the UN will be forced to give sanctions or warnings, and in the worst case scenario, put Mexico on probation. At the same time, if the EZLN army or movement is still causing revolts in Mexico, the UN will be forced to withdraw its support. Thank you so much for listening, and here are the references.